can't do anything until I
Are these yours?
They're Mr.
I was really
Washburn.
lucky that
Is he this age?
you got somebody that
It is. It's interesting. She's listening to some of that. Be nice to have it. Did this get closed?
to have that open source.
It did get closed. Here it is. Here it is.
You know, I used to work with a guy who was
expensive
older than you are. He didn't have like glasses or Horwitz because he was taking the whole so we wrote it through this paper here.
Like squirrels in
So welcome to Developer Partnerships. I'm Staci Horwitz with the City of Lakes Community Land Trust, and
Trent Gerads with the Cascade Community Land Trust.
so thank you for joining us this afternoon. And for those of you who were in this morning's presentation, the introduction that I had planned for this afternoon was already used. So we're going to switch it up a little bit and do something different. And I think let's just really quickly go around, because I don't know that, I know we had introductions yesterday, but we've had a few new faces here. Just really quickly, your name and something you think you've done that nobody else in the room has done. And so we'll start back there.
That's a lot of pressure.
What?
It's a lot of pressure.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
I've done a lot of things I can't talk about.
Maybe well, that's why we do this, and you're allowed to disclose as much as you want to disclose. There will be no judgment, but it's a good way to know a little bit more about one another beyond the social network. So, who wants to start? Somebody's got something.
I'll start.
Yes.
Alvin here, and I planted rice in Thailand once.
You planted rice in Thailand?
Planted rice, yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, that's so cool.
I'll pass it over here.
Well, my name is Emily, and I'm from Grand Forks. I have absolutely no idea, so I'm sorry. I have to think about that
Go
more. I
ahead.
have no
We'll
idea.
come back to you. Mr. Washburn.
Jeff, here in Minneapolis, City Lakes Community Land Trust. I've been mugged a few times in Honduras.
Huh? There you go.
Yeah,
Way to bring up the crew.
That's one of the happier ones I was going to share. Yeah.
Where else? There you go.
Sherry Marty from Central Wisconsin. I got my private pilot's license at age 22.
Awesome. Nice.
I'm not current now, but
But you can still fly plane in an emergency, right? Yes.
Ben Post, Twin Cities Habitat, and I did some trekking in the Himalayas. It's pretty neat.
Jake, you want to go?
Oh boy. Maybe turn the camera off. No, I'll say I'll keep it tame. Last winter, skated across Lake Hiawatha on the nice ice with no snow on
There you go. Without falling down?
it, without falling down.
Okay.
Luckily,
Or through.
or through. Definitely.
We can either keep going around, or we can go to Justin, or...
I can go. I'm Jasmine, Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership. One of the coolest things about me is that I was born in California. And the saddest thing is that I moved to Iowa.
Hi, Makia Griffin, Executive Director of Rondo Community Land Trust, and I used to sing in bands around town.
We know who next year's entertainment is.
Exactly.
Jen Wiedemann with Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership, and I've worked backstage at I don't even know, probably 30, 40 concerts, all sorts of bands.
Where at? Or just different venues?
I went to school at Iowa State University, Iowa, and Hilton Coliseum was a pretty popular place for concerts.
I'm Janelle with West Central Community Land Trust in Alexandria. And I don't know, I flew to Germany in a C-130. That was just the Army, so in the Army, you might have done it.
My name is Dakota. I'm with Wonder Community Housing. I think something I probably am the only one that does is I surf Lake Superior for my hobby. So, yeah.
When do you start?
It's kind of picking up right now, so I've been going these last couple weeks. There's been some days, but it's kind of like, it's when the storms come.
Yeah.
So it's not like an ocean where you get nice smooth swells. You're kind of out there when the weather's bad. So.
Justin?
I'm Justin Gorder, Roundabout CLT. I honestly can't think of anything
Same boat.
So those of you who had an interesting conversation post-conference, feel free to find Justin. Yeah. Justin Voss.
Hey, I'm Justin with First Towns down in Rochester. I guess I dropped out of engineering. Engineering dropout. Now I'm here.
What's the Community Land Trust claim to fame? We all dropped out of some other career.
Noah with Wonder Community Housing, and I would say meeting Bruce Springsteen, but I'm not sure if Jen did or not when she worked backstage.
I don't know how to follow that. But I'm Jessica Coyle. I'm with Twin Cities Habitat. This recent experience, I dove a catamaran wreck in Panama.
Ashley Lasensky with Cooley Cap and Cooley Community Land Trust, and because I appreciate yours so much, I failed pre-calc twice in college, and I refused to give them any more money to take it again, and I said, that's fine, I'm done.
Emily, did you come up with it?
Yes. Okay. So I had to have my heart restarted when I was pregnant, and I was totally aware. I was in tachycardia, and the doctor said, I'm going to inject something into your vein, and for a minute you're going to feel something crushing your chest, and then you're going to be fine. I was like, well, okay. And my husband almost passed out, and then all the nurses went and looked at him, and I was like, okay, but no.
Excuse me, I'm so here.
I know. Don't sit here.
At age 52, I zip-lined and scaled waterfalls in the rainforest in Mexico where Predator was filmed.
Wow. Mariah Good, Durham County Housing Partnership, and even though I hate heights, I went skydiving one time.
David DeVelder, Dwelling Place Community Land Trust. I just biked from like southern Michigan up to the bridge in a bike tour over Labor Day. It's about 400 miles. It's been a while since I've done that.
That's impressive. Sherry Timmerman, Good Pastor, Two Rivers Community Land Trust, and let's see, my husband and I own an orchard and a vineyard, and we're opening a winery.
Linda Janowski, Scott County Community Land Trust. This turned out well, but my daughter, when she was 5, fell in an ice fishing pool about this big, and I was able to pull her out by her collar before she sunk.
And in the back, your name and something that you have done that you don't think anybody else in the room has done.
My name is Michael Leahy. I'm with Castlewood Capital, so social impact financing for real estate projects. And the thing that pops to my head is I was in Bolivia when the coca farmers rose up and overthrew their government in 2003. And I was in a youth hostel in La Paz watching the coca farmers fight the soldiers out in the streets of the capital as they took back control of their country, which was pretty wild.
I don't think anybody else has done that. You won, dude.
Oh, you know, I was there.
Reed McCullough with the Chavy Housing Trust in Colorado, and I work security backstage for a venue, and I got to escort Miles Davis from his limo backstage, and I had no idea who he was.
My name is Mary Coddington. I'm with the Neighborhood Development Collaborative in Colorado as well. And sticking with the theme of famous folks, I had a surprise breakfast with Dennis Rodman.
Nice.
Yeah.
Just looking for places.
Yes, exactly. It was like a hotel breakfast, and he just came and sat at like a little four-top I was at. It was wild.
My name is Joanna. I work for Wonder Community Housing, and I can't really think of anything like super good, but I was tricked to eat a worm when I was little. It was gross.
This one kind of got used before, so we're introducing name and something you've done that no one else in the room that you think you've done.
You want me to go?
Yes.
My name is Yoel Gebremeskel, Executive Director of a nonprofit called Street Fraternity in Denver. Something that I will pass for now, what do you
Okay.
think?
Well,
I don't know.
if you think of something,
I'll share.
please, yeah. And
Oh, sweet, yeah. Jeru, I'd say I went to a hot springs in Fairbanks, Alaska. That was really beautiful.
nice. And Trent?
Trent, Cascade Community Land Trust. I completed a Ragnar race that was actually ran from Wisconsin to downtown Minneapolis somewhere. I don't remember where. It's like 300 and some miles. I had 12 of us though, so it wasn't just me. But.
And Staci Horwitz, as I mentioned. All right, I'll push that one aside. I grew up twirling baton and ceremonial knives, and so that was something that kind of different. Yes?
Came up with one. Costa Rica, whitewater rafting soccer team, zip lining soccer team. Played in a stadium, played with the zip lining team. Smoked cigarettes at halftime and drank beer.
There's a great ending, you know?
How do I get part of this team?
Yeah. Well, thank you all for indulging. I think that's. Oh, I'm sorry.
Ken Rovinsky with Greater Green Bay Habitat for Humanity. I played in and won a hockey tournament in Iceland.
Oh, nice. Nice job. Well, I thank you, because I think it's a great way to just get some new energy for the afternoon session, and it also is a gentle reminder that we are so much more than what our titles are and what we do on a daily basis, and that we've all had incredible lives in one way or another and have many, many years to go. So, what are we doing this afternoon? We're going to talk about developer partnerships, basically talking about different partner possibilities, some key considerations to think about when you think about developer partnerships, some of the advantages of working with developers, the disadvantages, I think some of the lessons learned, and again, we're asking for your thoughts and your feedback as we go through this. We do have an activity, give you a chance to kind of talk and work with one another for a little bit this afternoon, and then we'll just wrap up with questions and takeaways. One of the things that Trent and I talked about was trying to set the stage for what we mean by developer versus builder, in case that's kind of interchangeable in people's minds. What we're looking at is the kind of the financing, the entity that's taking all the risk behind versus like someone who's physically building the structure. So when we talk about developer, we're talking about the entity that's really coming with everything to make the deal work and to build it, but not be necessarily the actual builder. So with that, I will turn it over to my esteemed colleague.
Esteemed, great. So partnership possibilities, there's a couple that we're working on right now in our area, in our CLT. One of them is actually working with some of our land developers as we do a land swap. So one of our practices within our land trust is that we will buy lots that we probably will never, ever develop or build on, largely because we know that we'll be able to put them in our trust or maybe swap them later, but that way we can safeguard them for other future development. A great example we have, we're actually in the middle of purchasing some lots from actually some homes from a quote-unquote slumlord in our community. And a lot of some of his properties that he has are right off the edge of downtown Fargo. We have no desire to build single-family homes in just right downtown Fargo, but it's really a great opportunity for us to purchase those and then use those as leverage down the road with the city or other developers, builders, whoever, as well to make that a more usable place than having just another single-family house that doesn't belong in downtown. Another one that we're working with is we're working with a nonprofit developer that is in. They typically make affordable rental units. They use a lot of LIHTC credits, low-income housing tax credits, to build those. We're actually working with them and have entered into partnerships where they, as those credits are coming due, the money and the investments are no longer there. We actually step in then and purchase those single-family homes. Some of them are twin homes, and convert them into single-family home owner-occupied. So that's been a really great way for us to buy 30 units at a very below market value price that we can then turn around and put them into owner occupied. So they took all the risk of getting this. Thankfully, this organization 15, 20 years ago when they built these, they had this thought in mind. There just wasn't an organization around to handle it. And then we were created about 3 years ago. So we kind of stepped in at the right time, which is nice, but it's been a really good avenue for us. With that as well, city, we're also working with our city of Moorhead on the Minnesota side with a very similar project as well, which is another 17 units where they're taking low income tax credit houses and turning them into owner occupied as well. So again, able to get into those and pass those savings along. Are a couple of our partnerships. Certainly we work with other land developers and those people that are creating the larger developments that, and if you don't know this, every land developer has 1 or 2 lots they can never get rid of for a variety of reasons. Please do your homework, because I have learned this lesson, maybe something later, that sometimes there's drainage issues and you can't build on the lot they give you, but that's a whole nother thing. So, but be careful of that, but there's always a lot or two that they can't build on or they can't sell that they're willing to potentially give at a lower price point or maybe even for free as well. So is there any other partnerships that people have maybe utilized or can think of as well that might be possibilities?
It's the question on your light tech deals. Are those from a housing type? Are those single family or townhome?
Yeah, there's actually one townhome. It's a multifamily split into 4, like a duplex really. And then there's a majority of them are twin homes. And then there's 4 that are single family homes. The ones that we're doing in Moorhead, those are all townhomes. It's 17 townhomes, row home really. Any other questions or other possibilities?
Question on the light tech deal too. Are you buying those as the timeline expires?
Yeah.
I can't remember what.
Yeah, it's
that restricted land use.
Yeah. So the great thing, so some of that land use, the LURAs will have to inherit, which is okay because it just safeguards the long-term affordability of it anyway. So the 80% area median income is exactly what we agreed to sell these at. So that won't be an issue for us moving forward. We have to be mindful of it, obviously, but all the other credits are done.
One that I haven't seen, but I would like to build into a project that I'm working on is where a large-scale developer doing catalytic development either supports marketing of CLT information to the neighborhood that might be affected by the larger development, or puts money into the CLT to help stabilize residents.
So,
If you got it.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Go ahead and then I'll take it.
So not quite that big, but that's another project that we're actually working on right now. We are working with a few others in city of Moorhead. There's a very low income community that we're working now to build a childcare, wraparound services, really put investment back into the community or into that neighborhood as well, which then certainly will, our hope is that it'll spur other expansion and also give home ownership a chance, because almost everybody in that neighborhood rents, and so we're trying to do some of that to really turn around that stigma and that perception of that community or that neighborhood as well. So, but
there is one example might be Delray Beach CLT. They had an agreement, if I'm remembering it correctly, where there was a developer that was developing more condos and more vertical multifamily, and then actually agreed, I think it was almost a city block that they built of single family homes that went into the land trust as an offset, if you will, to the impact they were going to have in the immediate neighborhood. So that might be one that maybe reach out to Evelyn Dobson at Delray Beach and just see how they've worked with developers. The only one that we kind of even comes close to that is a while ago we were trying to work with a private developer that was developing quite a few multifamily in high concentration in a single area, and had the idea that their real estate team could react quicker than we could possibly react when single family homes came on the market that might be affordable and could acquire it, and they would put some funds into it to make it affordable. We just couldn't quite get on the same page as to level of rehab and those type of things. We were able to do one home with that particular developer, but I still think that model has some real validity, and after seeing what was done in Delray Beach, I think there's some opportunity if you can find the right developer or kind of build those into different policies and those type of things. So, yeah, I think it's an interesting concept. I just don't know how easily it is to do.
One other developer that we have worked with and others have as well is Habitat for Humanity as well. So I mean, sometimes we forget that Habitat and other nonprofit organizations are developers as well, and so that's always a great opportunity for us, at least, to share resources and community knowledge as well. So that's been a very good developer partnership for us.
So, I would say some of the, like, in creating a community land trust in Indianapolis, a lot of the players have been the community development corporations who really expressed an interest in having it be more long-term, because I feel like they've seen a lot of their developments contribute to gentrification in some of the neighborhoods. So they would like to stop that. So I think there's some interest. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. It might look like different for every person. There's some who are like, okay, we want to conceive this project, and can the CLT bring anything to the table? Some are like, well, we're going to do this project. Can we put it in the CLT?
Yeah.
So,
and I think it's really helpful if you are seen as an entity that can help with the affordability, to really have those conversations ahead of time as to what is the expectation of how much affordability you can bring. So I think about single family developments and new construction, rehab. It's so much easier to say, you know what, this is what we have. We can help and maybe reserve, quote unquote, funding for property X, and we're gonna bring $50,000. It's very different than the home is built, it's rehabbed, land trust, you got any money that we can help make this affordable? That's a more difficult conversation because you don't always have the funds available. Whereas if you're developing that partnership early on and what the expectations are, what everybody's trying to achieve, whether it be multifamily or single family, it's really critical that those elements or that framework is spelled out so that there's an understanding between all parties of what can be expected when the project is actually done. And that ties into where like a CLT and a developer co-develop a property, which some of you were in this morning's session about condos and townhomes, and we talked a little bit about that, where it may be that the CLT owns the land and somebody else is constructing on the land, and they will become land trust units long term. You also have the scenario where a developer is developing and they have a certain affordability number of units that need to be required, and those become land trust units, and there's an agreement as to how the land trust comes into ownership of those units through the individual buyers and owners.
one other partnership possibly that's come up recently is the city of Indianapolis has been sitting on like 100 lots concentrated in 2 particular neighborhoods that are like lower income neighborhoods. And they're wanting to do, I think, an RFP at the end of the year to say, hey, we want to develop affordable housing with the emphasis on long-term affordable housing on these lots. And we're going to put some money, like $100,000 per unit or whatever on it. So, and I don't know how you would conceive of it, but they're like, hey, can the CLT play a part in that in some way? I don't know if they know exactly how they want to do it, but whether there would be some kind of RFP process that the CLT could put out and say, hey, we would be interested in stewarding properties if developers want to build on it, and what are some possible, so I don't know, that's kind of just something that's
Well, and you could even
out there.
get an idea of what developers are possibly thinking about putting and responding to the RFP, and whether there's any potential to partner with that as well, or what requirements the city comes with in order to keep those homes affordable if they're wanting to support long-term affordability. Yes?
Are there any restrictions on a CLT owning an equity stake in a for-profit project?
Not that I'm aware of. Jeff or Ben or anybody else in the room that's kind of gone on the path?
A nonprofit or CLT owning a stake in a for-profit?
A CLT, so say one of the, if you're not doing the whole unit but you're in not just having the affordable units, but also saying that you want 10% of the overall project equity stake. I don't know what it'd look like, but I don't know that there's anything statutorily or legal that prevents that conversation from happening.
It's interesting. I'm working with a modular developer in Colorado who's got a net zero solar equipped module home that's too expensive to meet lower AMIs. We think we can hit 100% to market rate, depending on a few variables, but we still want to help meet the need for the under 100% AMI So we're trying to think creatively about how we could partner with Land Trust or Habitat or somebody like that to deliver the lower AMI units while we deliver the higher AMI units, and then thinking about what that partnership structure looks like. There's advantages to the for-profit entity of having a nonprofit partner, and I guess there could be advantages the other way as well. I haven't seen examples of it very much, but it seems potentially interesting.
I don't know if Habitat gets this, but there have been times where some allies at the city of Minneapolis have said, hey, there might be an opportunity developing this as a market rate property, and take the proceeds from that and then roll it into your mission to do the affordable housing work. And I think at least the rub for us is we don't want to do that in our own geography, our mission geography. You know, if we have the opportunity to get our hands on any unit in Minneapolis, we're going to try and make sure that we can create and maintain the affordability there. Now, what it does raise is the opportunity. Maybe we can take advantage of a home in Brenda's service area. Somebody donates a home in Edina, lets us develop it and sell it for $500,000. Take those proceeds and roll them back into Minneapolis, but then not within our own geography.
Yep.
So our CLT, we sell up to 110 AMI, so what our attorney has said is just watch out for IRS safe harbor to keep the portfolio below 80%. So as long as that stays under 80, you're fine, but
I was going to give the answer as well. Always check with your tax advisor for both the nonprofit and for the for-profit, just to make sure. For the nonprofit, obviously, there could be some issues in there. I can't think of any, but I'm sure there might be one. And certainly a lot of nonprofits are going to be worried about losing their nonprofit status, and that could put that at jeopardy. So just make sure they've done their homework, or at least ask them to. But I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Quick question about the safe harbor. So is it 80% fixed? I mean, what if funding allows you to do higher AMIs?
Oh, sorry.
The safe harbor, is it is the federal standard 8%?
80% AMI, that's what I understand to be.
But now the federal funding that we're seeing is going up to 110 or 20% AMI. So you're in jeopardy of losing your 503 status if you average higher than 80% AMI.
We're just ensuring that at least more than 50% of our homes are sold below 80%.
We've looked at deals and it hasn't been, what we've been advised is it's more like unrelated business income taxes would be your exposure. If you're going above a certain percentage, like for us, our charter is 80%. And so if we're gonna do homes over 80%, we gotta limit how much that is, or you could get into a place where you might trigger that. And then there's also that 501c3 depends on your articles of incorporation and how you're set up and who your target service, who your people are, your targeting.
Yeah. Do you have a good IRS or tax?
That's a whole nother session. No.
Yeah.
Can't housing authorities do that? I feel like I'm familiar with housing authorities selling market rate to kind of cross-subsidize other work if you tag a housing authority partner. Probably different state by state, but.
Yeah, generally they should have an AMI limit as well. I know our housing authority is specifically restricted to serving under 80% AMI. But they can, so like we have worked with CDBG money where it's got a 51% requirement. So if the whole project has a greater 80% AMI benefit, then we're kind of able to make that work. But as far as just specifically working on something in excess, I don't think it's
Colorado just created, and it's not set up yet, a middle income housing authority to address higher AMIs that still get the tax benefit. Might be a way to go, Michael.
Housing authorities are chartered by their state, it's HUD programming, but there's state, whether it's or whatever your governing documents are. So that's what you have to look at for that.
Cool, sorry. So some of the key considerations when you think about creating development partnerships or developer partnerships, are the resources really in your community? Do you have the developers that you can partner with? I think when we started, there was kind of an abundance of developers, and there still is a plethora in the Twin Cities area, but I think we also have seen a little bit of shrinkage. But I think where you're choosing to develop is, do you have those community resources? Is there the public funding that can support those partnerships? So that's one of the things you want to think about. Organizational capacity. Even though the developer may be doing the bulk of the work, if you're doing like a co-development or they're developing and you're just coming in and stewarding the units, that still takes organizational capacity. It may not take as much if you're acting as if you were acting as the developer, but you still need to make sure that you have some capacity to create those partnerships, to facilitate those partnerships, to make sure that the project is going the way it is, that it meets the expectations that you all talked about. So you don't want to shortchange the capacity you may need in the organization. The knowledge and experience. If you don't have it as a CLT, the developer you're partnering with, there's been a lot of initiative at the City of Minneapolis to work with new developers. And so also, what does that entail? If this is somebody's first project, and how do you partner in that situation versus a long-time developer who's done hundreds and hundreds of units within a particular community, and wanting to make sure you understand the level of knowledge and experience that a particular developer may have, as well as your own experience. Like, what can you truly bring to the table, and what other team members do you need, whether it be contracted or otherwise, to make sure that you can have a knowledgeable development and a partnership. Financing capability is another consideration. Does the developer really have the funding to make this whole project work, and that you're not going to get a half-built development and end up with a more challenging situation than if you did it yourself? Also, your own financing capability. Can we really step in at the affordability level that we need to in order to make these units affordable to the demographic that we've defined for the project? Funding timeline, this is one, and this was mentioned this morning as well, is that when you enter into some of these partnerships, and especially if your primary role as the land trust is to bring the affordability assistance, or maybe even some development gap, is the project timeline aligned with funding timelines? And we have encountered, and I'm sure you've encountered, and I would suspect many others in the room have encountered, that they want to start building and they want to have it done and they expect all this funding to be in place, but the RFP is not going in until January, you won't find out until October, and the units are supposed to be sold by September. So you want to make sure that all those things align when you're thinking about creating that developer partnership, and that you're very real, that even though you may go in January for funding, that doesn't mean you're going to get funded for this project the first time around. And is there really a community need? Sometimes we think we're just going to develop for the sake of developing because we own a piece of land, but is that really satisfying a need? And is the development that's being proposed in the partnership really satisfying a community need? I think that's one we overlook a lot, especially as we think about how we sustain organizations, earned revenue. I encourage us not to lose sight that what we're doing is really responding to a community need, and not just something that we think needs to be done because we need to develop as an entity, we need to have developer partnerships, the developer has a piece of land. Like, how are we truly solving for our housing issues in our different communities? And then I mentioned the changing roles because for our organization, particularly the City of Lakes Community Land Trust, we worked a lot in developer partnerships. We didn't technically develop our own properties when we first started the organization. And it was the buyer-initiated program and developer partnerships that really brought in the initial units into the land trust. Fast forward, you know, we started in 2002, fast forward to 2013, 2014. The city really wanted us to rehab this house. And we're like, well, why doesn't anybody else want it? To your point, it's like, why doesn't anybody else want this house? And it was a period of time where we were coming out of the foreclosure crisis. So many houses had been demolished. There just wasn't, they're like, we just don't want to take this one down. And we had a homeowner at the time who said, well, let me videotape your process since this is your first one. And we were going through, and he's like, explain the land trust. And at one point in time, he's like, this would make a great horror movie set. Because there was the kitchen, the ceiling was down, the floors were warped. It had gone through a tornado, it had gone through open roof, and we're just like, again, why? But we took it on, and that was our very first rehab that we took on, and it turned out beautifully. And we started kind of moving into that developer role. So even though we didn't start out that doesn't mean that because you choose as a young organization to partner with community developers and other, whether it be CDCs or private developers or other nonprofit developers, doesn't mean that at some point in time in the life cycle of your organization that you will end up being in the developer role. So I always encourage you to take advantage if you are in those partnerships, and I think in hindsight, having been more involved in really understanding the process, probably would have strengthened us as a developer when we first took on some of those roles, because I think a lot of our success was because of the team we had around us, and architect, contractors, builders, that really helped us be successful as we stepped in. And we went from a couple of rehabs to then constructing homes. And I always joke that, I don't know if Jeff remembers this, but when we were constructing our first home, which we decided to do an accessory dwelling unit, and we ended up on, instead of one home, 2 homes was new construction. And I just remember one afternoon popping my head into Jeff's office and reminding him that I'm actually a registered dietitian and he's expecting me to build a single family home. I just wanted to remind him of that fact, and in case it didn't work out. So, you know, those roles are going to change over time. So where you think you may be now as an organization doesn't necessarily mean that's where you'll be in a decade or even 15 years down the road. And the more you can flex, the more you can understand how you can respond and what your role is in your community and within the land trust, I think the more powerful your organization will be. Any comments, Trent?
No. Go ahead.
Actually, just on that ADU point that you mentioned, I hadn't thought about this. Are your buyers allowed to count that ADU income in their income?
No.
But then in practicality, they'll ultimately, it's a potential income source for them.
It is
They
a
just
potential.
can't count it for the.
They can't count it because it's not necessarily, for our purposes, we really focused on, and I'm sorry, I just hit the microphone. We focused on a multi-generational housing was really the intent of behind it. We had to count the income of the individual if they knew who the individual was that was in the ADU for income qualification for the land trust, but it was not included in consideration for the mortgage financing. Other questions?
So some advantages that we have by partnering with developers, just like Staci said, we're a very new organization ourselves, and so we do a lot of we call ourselves a developer, but we really partner with everybody else to develop and build, which is great because there's only a staff of 2, and so that helps us to maximize our staff time because we have industry experts that are out there doing all the things that need to get done. There's also the financial risk that can be taken on with some of those projects. As we've already learned, we did remodel one house and turn it over, and I tell you that show love it or list it is so true because the budget kept going higher and higher and higher, and as soon as we got done, then there was a hole in the tub, and then we had to, anyway. So there's those things that actually get taken on ahead of time, provided that you have good, provided that both you and the developer understand what your roles and responsibilities are. It's a very good relationship because everybody knows where one begins and one ends. There's also, coming back to the funding part and making sure that all lines up, there is an advantage here because again, for us, a lot of times the developers are taking all that financial risk and they're allowing us really to market and sell the house, and that's how we help pay them back. So they're carrying those loans for us, so that way we don't have to take out our line of credit or use our cash on hand. Yes, we still pay for the interest in some of those things. Insurance, they help to cover that and wrap that into the cost as well. So that way it's all ways that we don't have to keep applying for 13 or 14 different development insurance pieces as well. You get to start having some predictability. Once you obviously have a working relationship with somebody, you can expect what the project is going to be. You know where the shortfalls might be and the upswings, all those things. Also, when you have that partnership, when you do have that bad news, it gets a little bit easier to swallow because again, you have partnerships there. I'm trying to think if there's anything else not listed, but
Well, I think the biggest,
Yeah.
one of the things you mentioned when we were talking about this presentation was the importance of inviting the community.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, that was one I did want to get to. The other great thing about working with developers is that, provided that you're willing to go out and meet with more than one, you're now getting to share the CLT story. In our case, the CLT story, your program story, which then just gets more people bought in to what you're doing. We live in a community, like I'm sure all of you do, that the more money and the more willing we are to work with people, it's amazing how much they're willing to work with us and help us back. And so by us spreading out and having 3 or 4 or 5 developers that we work with on certain projects and different projects has really helped us to get our word out there as well, which is, I think, part of the reason why we find ourselves in a position that we're acquiring quite a bit of land right now from developers and builders that are looking to move on from pieces of land. And again, they're not all perfect pieces of land, but we'll take them. So. Some disadvantages. Certainly, if you get caught up with one developer, you have one really style house, which can be a detractor, especially if it's throughout the entire community, because sometimes it doesn't fit. Your community might have some historic districts or overlays, and your developer may not be well versed with those. You'll learn about that in lessons learned. But so some of those where you just need to make sure you're finding the right developer. But if you really work with just one, you could be you could find yourself in a situation. As well as certainly cost and some of that funding, as we mentioned before, you need to do your homework to make sure that your builder, your developer, has got the cash on hand and the ability to help finance some of those projects that you're working on. Let's see here. Yeah, less portfolio, limited. Yeah, it's really. For us, we haven't really experienced much of these disadvantages yet. I'm sure they're out there, but we've really had pretty good experiences so far. But there are some considerations of when we want to actually become our own developer and doing some of those things, and then breaking those community ties as well is somewhat tricky things to take into consideration, I guess, as well. And you might have a story to add to that, but
No, I think that's good. Any other comments, questions, things that people can think of from that could be advantageous or work against you as a CLT, partnering with developers?
I just have a question. Jen, about land, acquiring undeveloped land. Is there any experience in the room with that? Buying bare land that was maybe previously ag land or something like that and turning it into a subdivision or co-developing?
We have not. Has anybody else in the room done that where it's a
small development in Shoreview that needs to go through all the planning and zoning. It's got, needs complete infrastructure, but it's gonna hold about 6 units. We're working with, working with Habitat on that. We brought Habitat in on that.
We're talking like 4 acres.
I wish it were a couple of acres. It's close. It's close enough. It's kind of an acreage, kind of like that. It's a couple. It's a couple. And we were doing that in partnership with the city of Shoreview as well. I don't know if that was.
yeah, versus like a resident already a zone residential. Is that what you're thinking?
Instead of buying lots that are kind of like
already
shovel ready or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Real curious in this concept of just buying 40 acres.
Developing
doing
over
100
time.
units or something, yeah.
I think it's really difficult, especially in a lot of more urban, is just the availability of sizes, versus if you're getting out further, there might be some of the agricultural that's being converted into residential in those. I can't even, I'm sure there's a couple acre spots, but I don't know any big large ones in Minneapolis when I think about stepping into that.
Sure. Yeah, I'd just say on that front, in traditional development, the value add from taking raw land to entitled and parcel land is the biggest benefit relative to risk of all of real estate. So if a nonprofit did that, you could recapture some of that profit at low risk and channel that through the lower AMIs. So I mean, if you can get your hand on, even though there's a longer process and there's entitlement risk, there's new risks that come up, but on a total risk to return perspective, there's no better way to create value than from raw land, in my opinion.
And what scares us is just the infrastructure costs for us. I mean, from affordability standpoint, it just, in our area, it just kills us. One other thing, there's just one other disadvantage that is listed up there, but be careful with who you partner with, because their name becomes part of you as well. And so if you have a questionable organization or developer that's been building some houses for you or doing some other things for you, you will get tied to that. So just be, aware of that, as well as if they build bad stuff or if they're just bad business people, you might need to distance yourself. So that's just another consideration and could be a disadvantage. If you're a control person, you probably don't really want to partner because you kind of lose some of that control when you're working with developers, but I'm willing to give that up for the time that I save. So that's just me. Okay.
All right, let's come back together. I don't necessarily think that we need to have you kind of go through everything, but I think maybe we'll have the back two share a couple of things around considerations, or what was it, project information. So 2 or 3 things that you think are really key that you want to know if you're considering a developer partnership or if a developer is approaching you. Anybody want to chime in? Makia? Of course, because you're looking at me.
I still love you, Staci.
Love you too.
We'd want to, depending on the project, what's the expertise that they have? Can they do that? Do they have a financial wherewithal, depending on who they are in the project? If they're going to do that, do they understand your mission and vision and values? And those would be some of the things. We went down a little bit of a different track for this question, but I think that's good. Right? What else would we think about? That's good. Yeah, we're good.
Okay, awesome. How about back here? Any other considerations or any information you'd want to know before you start to engage in this relationship?
Well, we hit on that too. What's their experience? What other partnerships have they had? What is the housing type? What are the funding sources and uses?
Cool. Anybody have anything else that they felt was important?
Why are they there? Why are they coming at you? They're either required to, they're required to, the money's requiring it.
This is our conversation.
It's either the funding, the community is forcing them to create affordability, permanent affordability, and or.
This house could be a horror movie.
Nobody else wants it. What is the intent, right? What is the motive behind funding? And what about who you're going to serve? How many have encountered developers who are like, oh, you can go to 80% AMI. Awesome, we're going to sell everything at 79.9% AMI.
Yeah.
And then you start to have the conversation that says, no, we need to be back down to 60 and 65% AMI. And they're like, wait, what? That's not what our financial modeling had talked about. So I think really also having an understanding of how this works. We often joke this is the absolute worst business model ever, because you build a house for 400 and you're selling it for 200 and it's only worth 300. That does not register with most people, right? And so you start talking to developers and you really have to spend some time helping them understand we're not just solving for the 400 to 300 gap, we're solving for the 300 to the 200 gap on top of it. And that really does make a difference in how this works. So, great. The next one was, what can you expect, or what are the roles for the CLT? Middle table. What are your thoughts?
Nobody said, what do we get?
Oh, what do we get? Yes.
So,
okay.
Collecting developer fee is the first rule.
Right.
That's only one role we can focus on.
We are that
sustainability. Sustainability.
It seemed like our conversation was, we almost needed a hypothetical to know, like, okay, what's the knowledge, or what experience is the CLT coming to the table with, what experience and knowledge is the developer partner coming to the table with, to establish those roles, or where those gaps were.
Do we have to raise money, or are they doing that?
What else?
And we had, like you mentioned, the staff capacity, can we do this? Holding the developer accountable, and, for that brand and reputation piece that Trent mentioned.
Other things, other thoughts, comments? What's one of the #1 reasons that developers may seek us out?
Tax credits.
Tax credits?
Required by whatever the funding source is.
I'm sorry, what?
Required by whatever the funding source is. Are we a checkbox?
Yep.
Some points.
What else?
Inclusionary housing requirement.
I'm sorry, what?
Inclusionary housing requirement.
Okay. What is it that land trusts do best?
Stewardship and raise money.
Stewarding affordability, that's also going to be one of those responsibilities that we have. We can't lose sight of that as well. How about what we can expect from a developer? For those who flipped over the page. I'm getting the evil eye from the background. You guys want to chime in?
Hopefully carrying the financial burden.
For the actual physical development?
During the the development process, yeah.
Anything else? Other things, Alan?
Build something, maybe.
I laugh because I shared the conversation about the one developer that we've been in conversation with for, I think, going on 4 years. Yeah.
At least initially, it feels like there's intent that they're coming to the table with the development gap side of the equation mostly figured out. And now the market may shift under them, and that may change, but at least it feels like they're coming with part of the solution in play.
Other thoughts, other comments?
One other thing I would add to that, depending on as a land trust or your entity's standing within the community, they could get some name recognition out of that as well. There's certainly some developers in our town that are asking us to be part of the solution for them because they could use some good publicity for a variety of reasons. And so that's something else.
Other thoughts? Okay, let's launch into the last one, which is, I forgot. CLT approval process, thank you. What do you think that might look like? You're the property development manager, you're the development manager for the CLT. Developer says, we want to do 80 units, we're going to expect you to bring 500,000 to affordability. You're like, yep, let's go for it. Is that the best process for a CLT to make that decision?
Exactly.
Okay, other than Rondo.
Simpler.
So it's wait. Do we ask for a process or do we ask for forgiveness?
Well, first of all, we're going to have to get our boards comfortable with things that are going on. So let's do that first, unless it's part of your strategic plan. Wink, wink. So don't do that. Let's see. I don't know. We just have to make sure that it financially works. On that, we do have a pathway by which we can actually raise the money.
Yeah. What are some other things we use for evaluation of a process? We're figuring out if we really want to move forward. I'm sorry, what? Performance? Yeah. Making sure you guys strong performance.
What are they?
Oh, Emily, sorry.
What are they asking us to do, and are we capable of doing it?
Yeah. Do we really truly have the capacity to deliver on our part of what we're?
What's our relationship with them? Is there alignment? What we're trying to do and they're trying to do?
Did you have something, Jeff?
We have a risks and mitigants document that includes performance, design, market analysis before we put a shovel in the ground. So if we've built a house before, that same design, it's a somewhat similar neighborhood. It's pretty smooth going through, but if it's, when we did the narrow house last year, it was quite a hoot. There were tears, yeah. They weren't mine for a change.
Okay. Well, I think the key is there should be some sort of process. There should be some way that you're evaluating whether or not this partnership and this project makes sense for both parties, right? It's Obviously, we're more inwardly focused in those scenarios, but we also understand the importance of the partnership. And it doesn't do anybody any good to not be successful. So how do we can't ensure success in all cases, but we can help to mitigate the circumstances that might prevent it.
So, not to be flip, but we actually use a project review committee. I think you all have something
We have a
like
project
that
development
too, and
committee
when
as
it's
well.
something new. It's board members, our development staff, and some other community members. And we didn't always do that. And when we took some lumps, we decided we're going to do that always.
Yeah.
So.
It gives you different perspectives, and it brings things that you may not think of, just because we get entrenched sometimes in how we view things in our work and what we're trying to get done and all the umpteen million emails, and so to have some outside perspective from different perspectives. So we've had, questions about mortgage financing. How is the mortgage financing going to work? Are we set up to do that? And, does this developer have the capacity to do it? So I think those multiple perspectives are very valuable. And our project development committee actually created, it was probably about 5 years ago, I think, or 6 years ago, we did a development partner policy that really frames out what we want to see for information, what they can expect from us, what we can expect from them, and just some of those basic considerations. So I think it's just really helpful, because that's also helped to minimize, I shouldn't say minimize, but if a developer is really serious, they're going to review that, and then they're going to go to the next step, which is coming to our project development committee. If it's really just kind of a one-off, hey, we want to see if you're interested, do you have any funds to help us with this project? You give them that policy, and they're like, this is a little more intense than we thought, because we just thought you're going to bring some money to help us make this project work. So it also kind of helps weed out maybe some of the partners or potential partnerships that aren't truly serious and wanting to move forward.
The other thing about using a property committee or any kind of group like that, one thing about using board members or working with board members to make that decision, most people know who your board members are. We have them listed or whatever, but no one really asks about who's on your property committee. And it's a really great way to utilize them if the answer is no, to be like, that's what they decided. Compared to, because no one asks you who's on the property committee, so you don't have to say, oh, Justin's on it, so go talk to him. But they will talk to your board members if they really want it. So it's a way, I grew up in volunteer management. That's been a lot of my professional career. And the advice given to me 20 years ago was always keep a volunteer between you and trouble. And in this case, that's what that properties committee is. It's keeping me between them and trouble, because when I tell them no, it's that darn properties committee, guys. Come back next time. We might say yes then, right? And that way you as the lead for that organization can keep face, and you don't have to tell the properties committee you threw under the bus. So.
All right, let's move on to lessons learned and wrap it up.
Yeah, lessons learned real quick. Be solution oriented. A lot of these developers are coming sometimes with a blank canvas, sometimes with other thoughts, but so just being ready to say yes and how you can do that. I would also say we have to ask. We have to be, as a new organization, we have to show and ask what we can do to be part of that solution as well. Not on this list, but I'll quick throw in the timing. So largely because I just got this email. Funding timing. We have almost all of our funding pretty much out right now. We're also in the midst of buying another 9 properties that were supposed to close November 15th-ish, which worked. And now the email says, hey, how about October 10th? And I said, I don't think so, but yeah, I guess. So now, right now, we're in a funding crisis. It won't be for very long, but enough where if something else happened, we could be in some big trouble. But not woe is us, we got the money covered, it's just we got to work a little faster. So anyway, so just something to think about with that as well. No doesn't always mean no forever. So that's why I come back to that properties committee as well. So if you have to decline somebody, and not all opportunities we should say yes to, not all of them are going to work, but anytime that you can come back to that group and say, hey, the board met or the properties committee met and we just not a good time for us to leave that open, you'll be surprised. We have one developer who has just sold us 3 lots, who originally wanted $100,000 for them a year ago. Earlier this June, they wanted $50,000 for them, and now they called and said, how about you just pay half the back taxes? I said, well, how much is that? $20,000. Yeah, we can do that. So, the smallest lot, by the way, on this thing is like 16,000 square feet. So there's huge lots. Yeah, biggest one's 20,000 square feet. So I don't know what we're building yet, but we got 2 more lots. So anyway, so it's no doesn't mean no for now. It's also being part of that solution as well. So yeah.
Yeah,
this
and
one's something
we've
to-
touched on clear expectations and roles.
Yep.
And we talked about this morning, but just to reiterate, because I know there's some new individuals in this one, is really having a presence with that homeowners association and the development of documents, the condo docs or a townhome docs if it's a multifamily. So not just sitting by the wayside and letting that be developed, that it's really important that you have some say in how that is developed, as well as post-closing and everything else on those particular developments. Jeff?
There's been some stuff happened over the last couple of weeks that I think is kind of a harbinger of challenge and opportunity to come. And I think for context sake, so last week, the city of Minneapolis came out with a letter to any of its developers that are in one or more kind of funding rounds for development. Basically said out, hey, we're recognizing that there's construction challenges, supply line, all that kind of stuff. We're willing to provide up to another $40,000 in assistance to help you all get through this. I've heard in the grapevine that the state of Minnesota might be doing a similar thing here, which makes me think that yes, our funders are aware of kind of the challenges hitting the developers. I also am a bit aware about where the market is going, interest rates, all that stuff, and all these developers are trying to get the stuff developed. Realistically, it's not going to be ready until earliest a year from now. And where the market goes, and to this comment about a lot of our developer partners, we already know our pricing stuff. You know, they'll commit to 80%, but they're pricing it at 79.9% AMI, and there's not many people out there, and all it's going to take is a few more things to break. And so I think, you know, where my mind is going, there's going to be a lot of properties and a lot of partner developers struggling a year from now, and to the degree that we can accumulate some additional affordability gap and be able to kind of, especially if they haven't already identified the land trust as a partner, to put that on the table, I think there could be some opportunities from unlikely partners, because the economy is going to force it. And so I think just trying to think ahead about where the market's going, what the pressures are, and trying to anticipate where you might be able to create some additional ownership opportunities is worth thinking about as a real positive likelihood, I think.
Being open.
Yeah.
Yeah. Being open to opportunities.
One last other thing I would mention. If you are not part of your home builders association, if you have one in your community, please join. By the way, I'm not getting paid for this. Please join them. That has been just a wealth of knowledge for us, that we've found people for our properties committees and found ways to other developers, or even we had rehab type things. So I would just really encourage you to get involved and put the time into it as best you possibly can, or have a staff or something. But it's a relationship really worth having within your community.
Does that cost anything, or are there discounts for nonprofits? Or?
Ours is like $650 a year. Be careful, they'll ask you to be on some committee, but and if you don't show up, you get appointed. So, but outside of that, it's been a lot of fun. I actually sit on the public issues committee, which has been really interesting because I've been learning a lot more about code and just things that I typically would not pick up and read. And so it's been really interesting to see some of the other stuff that is going on too. I don't know, I'm sure they vary across the state, and states for that matter.
Questions, comments? Takeaways. Everybody's like, nope, we're ready for.
I learned that dietitians can build houses. So can engineers.
Engineers that chose not to continue.
I'm sorry, Justin, I couldn't resist. I
still want to be.
Yeah. I have to complete. I went to school to be an elementary ed teacher, so I also didn't end up in my career of chosen path. and part of the reason I wanted to be an elementary ed teacher is because I was always wondering what the teacher was doing while you're like working on your worksheet and stuff. And I realized today what it is. I was like, what should I have for supper? And do I wear a jacket? Don't I? Like, it was like all those things. And so it's not as glamorous as I thought when I was like in 4th grade, but anyway.
Awesome. Thank you all very much for this.
Thank you.